Little Nemo on the NES is a game based off the animated film Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland, which is based on the comic strip series Little Nemo in Slumberland. Our plot revolves around the titular character and takes place in the early 20th century, around the time the original comic strips were being published. Nemo is a little boy who is visited by a messenger. The messenger informs Nemo that Princess Camille of Slumberland is inviting him over so they can become playmates. Can you believe all this messenger has to do is bribe Nemo with candy, and he's good to go. Luckily for us, Nemo doesn't appear to have a stranger danger certification, assuming that was even a thing back in 1905. The game consists of 8 different stages. For each stage, our little Nemo is tasked with finding all the keys, then heading to the exit. Except for the last stage, but more on that later. There can be anywhere between 4 to 7 keys in each stage. You can tell by the amount of locks next to the exit. Once all are obtained, Nemo can exit the stage. Then you get to wake up so that your mom can yell at you. Our little friend will need help from all the animals around. We just gotta feed them some date rape candy and then they will fall asleep. Once asleep, our Nemo takes over their body. These creatures are known as Nemo's friends. There are hermit crabs, gorillas, hornets, frogs, lizards, moles, fish, and oversized mice. Some of the methods Nemo uses to take over some of these creatures are pretty questionable. The way Nemo rides a gorilla seems pretty normal. The gorilla just carries him. Makes sense, right? Now let's look at the frog, hornet, and mole. They are basically force-fed a little boy, and he also takes over their minds. Nemo wears them like they are onesie pajamas, and their heads look like they are hoodies now. That's no better than the hermit crab and the fish. They get half their head or shell ripped off. Just look at their faces. Before and after. Before and after. I get it, they're supposed to be asleep, but this doesn't look like the face of some sleeping animal. This does, but this one doesn't. This one does, this one not so much. Be careful not to approach them until they are asleep, otherwise you'll take damage. There are also some enemies like most other games. These creatures are barely even fazed by that candy. Throwing candy at them just stuns them for a few seconds. These enemies include flying fish, snails, stumpers, little frogs, black fish, these mouths that shoot white balls, these white moths, these balloons that drop what I'm assuming are bombs, whatever the this is, pufferfish that shoot their spikes, bats, snakes wearing bow ties, the black bird flip rides in the movie, monkeys that throw plates at you, Medusa heads that hang from a tree, airplanes, and last but certainly not least, float fiends, or as I refer to them, you motherfuckers. For these guys, we have to learn how to manipulate them, otherwise Nemo won't last in Slumberland. The game itself is very responsive. The way Little Nemo moves is very similar to another Capcom character you may or may not have heard of. Nemo is able to take 3 hits before dying, or waking up if we go according to Inception rules. When we take over one of our friends, we usually get more, but that depends entirely on which friend. For example, the gorilla has 6, the hornet has 4, and the frog, well, he just keeps us at 3. Spikes will kill Nemo with 1 hit, and it's kind of annoying. These spikes are probably my #1 cause of death. Obviously, bottomless pits will kill you too. As far as lives go, we start off with 3, and like with many other Capcom games, there are unlimited continues here. Expect to use a few of those along the way. For stage 1, we go to the mushroom forest. It is a forest filled with huge mushrooms. Mushrooms? Who would have thought that? Nemo starts his adventure by having a chat with Flip. If you've seen the movie or are just familiar with the lore, you know damn well who Flip is. At least he's not as troublesome here. Hey Flip, how about you tell your birds to stop attacking us? The first friend we get to take over is the frog. The frog is able to jump really high and kill most baddies, kinda like a certain plumber you may or may not have heard of. But man is it slow. We will eventually find a mole who will allow us to dig into the ground. And that's all he's really good for. It can't jump or attack, and he just moves really slow. The last friend we will find here is the lizard. I actually kinda like this one. It can't attack, but oh boy does it move fast. It knows how to jump, and it also allows Nemo to climb walls. Stage 2 has us going to the flower garden. It's a very nice looking stage that even has some swimming sections. This stage requires more exploring than the mushroom forest in order to find all the keys. Here we get our lizard friend back along with some new ones. There's the gorilla. He moves kinda slow but can climb walls. Also, he's able to punch and jump. We also meet the hornet for the first time here. The hornet is another one of my favorite friends. With it, we can forget about jumping. We can fly, but only for a limited time. Another thing that we encounter for the first time is the spikes, so be sure to watch out for them. If you look hard enough, you will even find the Easter Bunny makes an appearance here. How's that for an Easter egg? House of Toys. How I hate this stage. To begin, it's an auto-scrolling stage, which is kinda strange because I usually like those. But man, is this filled with some cheap deaths. Nemo jumps onto a train that starts moving. I don't remember the train ride being this dangerous in the movie. The balloons spawn at random here, and they will try to drop one of their bombs on you. Kamikaze planes attack in groups, so it's best to stay back to avoid them. But if you stay back, you have to dodge the balloon bombs, so pick your poison, I guess. The middle part of the stage is filled with spikes all along the top. Then the spike ceilings begin to crash down on you, while simultaneously more kamikaze planes come at you. The last part is probably the easiest part, but by this point Nemo is likely down to his last hit point. Luckily, we shouldn't have to worry about the keys as they will all be at the beginning and end. There's also some halfway through the stage, but those are just extras. The Night Sea is our next stop. Here we get to go for a swim, for most of it. You know, because of the sea part. There's even a sunken ship to emphasize the fact that we're at sea. The hermit crab makes its debut here. With the hermit crab, our Nemo is able to burrow through the dirt, kinda like the ball. But in order to do this, we have to jump first. We also find this big fish that we can ride. But all that changes is we get to swim faster. No attacks or any cool things, just swimming faster. We also find out how great of a swimmer our old friend the frog is. The next place we dream about is Nemo's house. For some strange reason, everything is twice as big. Personally, I would not want to live here. There are traps and bad guys all over the place. If you're not watching where you're going, you can end up falling a few stories. My advice here is don't die, because there are no checkpoints. If you end up dying towards the end, expect to start at the beginning. The only new friend we get here is the mouse. With the mouse, we can climb, jump, attack, break blocks, and walk at a normal pace. So yeah, this is probably my favorite friend to use. I would have to say this stage is the most time consuming, but definitely not the hardest. After leaving Nemo's house, our next stop is at the Cloud Ruins. We start off on what looks like Nemo's rooftop. After jumping a few rooftops over, we find the Hornet once again. With assistance from the Hornet, Nemo is able to make his way to the ruins in the sky. This part is pretty fun. Just gotta avoid all of Flip's birds and getting left behind. Once Nemo reaches the Cloud Ruins, we realize there's not much to them. Maybe before they were ruins, they might have looked cooler, but now, it's just a dangerous place. For the next part, we must bring Nemo back down to Earth. Luckily, all the keys will be conveniently located by the door. Topsy-Turvy is a very strange dream. Kinda looks like Nemo's house, but only upside down. Not as time-consuming as Nemo's house, but it is a little tougher. It's pretty straightforward, and the keys aren't that hidden when compared to previous stages. Just like the previous dream, there are no new friends to meet here. We have pretty much met every one of them. Once we're all done with that dream, we get a cutscene. Finally, Nemo gets to meet Princess Camille. We also find out that King Morpheus has been kidnapped by the King of Nightmare Land. The princess gives Nemo a staff he can use, the Morning Star. With the Morning Star equipped, Nemo can shoot a beam from it. What I don't understand is how come the king didn't use it himself. In the movie, he doesn't use it because he gave it to Nemo before the Nightmare King came for him. But here, what's the excuse? Oh well, doesn't matter now. Select can be pressed to switch between the Candy and Morning Star. Let me just say that Nightmare Land indeed lives up to its name. It is a dream unlike any of the others. Well, no, it's a f***ing nightmare. Here we are no longer tasked with finding any keys. Just reach the end and beat any of the bosses that get in the way. Also, this nightmare is split into 7 sections. If you die, you start at the beginning of whatever section you're on, but if you get a game over, you get to start the whole nightmare all over. Just imagine being on section 5 and then getting a game over just to go all the way to the beginning. Well, that happened to me multiple times, and it sucked. Section 1 has us starting in what looks like a cave. There are spikes everywhere and pits of lava. I love how the background is glistening a purplish color, even if you pause the game. Difficulty-wise, this stage is a little more difficult than any of the other dreams that came before. Well, with the exception of the toy house. That stage. At the end of this section, we meet our first boss. It looks like a giant penguin. Our foe here shouldn't present too much of a challenge. My advice for the penguin, and honestly any of the other bad guys going forward, is to just hold your beam until this bar fills up. Just don't take too long, otherwise... The second part is brutalish. I was cursing so much during this part. Nemo starts off by a lake with crocodiles in it. If we cross over it, there is a 1-up here. We're gonna need that. The goal is at the top. I can almost guarantee anyone who tries this for the first time won't be able to beat it. I would have to say that this is probably the hardest section in the game. We can expect to see fire erupting from the floors and walls, as well as these float fiends. It's bad enough having to time the fire eruptions, but to simultaneously avoid the cotton fiends is just insane. Especially when you consider that we only get 3 hit points to spare to reach the top. There is no room for mistakes. Yeah, we get to use our friend the purple lizard who has 4 hit points, but where are you gonna get that 4th hit point? Not here, that's for certain. This part here has to be the worst. So you manage to get through this obstacle course only to realize, wait, I can't get up there. I need someone who can jump high. The solution is the frog over there. The problem is that once Nemo takes over that frog, he's got to take this part again, but only this time with the frog. Remember earlier how I mentioned the frog was slow? Well, that's on full display here. Nemo is almost guaranteed to take damage here. If you have less than 2 hit points, just start the section over. It's almost not even worth trying. Not much to say about the third part. Gotta just avoid the spike ceiling that comes crashing down, as well as these white moths and more crocodiles. It will take a little bit of practice, but if you manage to get past that second section, I'm sure you will be just fine here. For the 4th section, we get to meet our second boss, Manta Ray, from the movie. Manta will fly at you and spit fire at the ground. So once again, use the Morning Star and try to only shoot once the meter is full. The 5th section is not a cakewalk, but once again, if you beat the second part, this one just takes some practice. Here, our Nemo must look for the mouse to get to the top, but in order to reach the mouse, we need to get the hornet located inside this cave. And before we can get that hornet, we will need to find our trusted friend, the lizard. Once we get to the top, we get the Nightmare King staring at Nemo in the background, as he is on his way to confront him. Maybe it's the metalhead in me saying this, but man, if that's not one of the freaking coolest looking level backgrounds in any game, I don't think I would know what is. The thing that makes this section a little difficult is, once again, we only have 3 hit points to make it to the end. Another problem I found was that once I got here, I usually only had a couple of lives left, so I would get a game over here only to repeat the whole nightmare again. Section 6 is by far the easiest of all the nightmare sections. All that really stood out is the 1-up scattered around, perhaps to prepare us for the final fight. As far as enemies go, just a few fiends, which we should honestly be pros at avoiding by now. Finally, Nemo has reached the Nightmare King. It's time to rescue King Morpheus. Unlike the movie, the Nightmare King does not die from one blast of our trusty staff. But I guess that's because that wouldn't make for much of a final boss fight. Instead, Nemo must shoot several fully charged beams at our foe, while also avoiding this red blob thing, and these red lasers that the Nightmare King is shooting. It's honestly not that hard. I know I've said it a couple of times by now, but if you can get past the second part of this nightmare, the rest of the game is beatable. This game is very underrated in my opinion. It's got a fantastic soundtrack, like most Capcom games, amazing graphics for an NES game, and great level design, even if it does bring my blood to a boil in some parts. Yes, I'm talking about you. I rarely see anyone talking about this game. In fact, I had never even heard of this game until I was already an adult. But I guess it's better late than never.